Hello everyone, and welcome back to Pale Shadows. I'm your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you through tonight's tale. I know many of you come here to relax, unwind, and maybe even drift off to sleep. So before we begin, take a moment, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time of night is it for you? Now find a comfortable spot, let the world slow down around you, and allow the story to carry you into the calm. The bunker took my breath twice, first from the cold, then from the stink of damp insulation and mouse nests. My lamp cut a blue wedge through dust, crawling across a corridor lined with peeling acoustic foam. Old posters winked in the beam. NOAA charts. HF band plans. A coffee-stained schematic for something called Project Cuth, Cache Tether, Ultra-Low Hertz. I brushed past it, leaving a brown fingerprint where the paper had fused to the wall. A switchboard room opened out like a mouthful of dead teeth. Racks and racks of silent equipment, tuners, preamps, patch bays, miles of coax. Cables dangled from the ceiling like vines. Someone had scavenged the obvious stuff years ago, but copper still slept in the walls. Thick bundles coiled in plastic trays, the kind scrappers dream about. I pictured them rolling under my boot, heavy as snakes, cashed in before the passes iced over. The speaker click came again, a tiny relay twitch from a corner shelf. I followed the sound to an old monitor speaker bolted to a bracket, dust-furred, cone-dented. The power light was dead, but the grill breathed cold air, as if the room itself had lungs. I tapped the grill with my knuckle. "Hello?" My voice didn't come back as echo. It came back corrected. Same timbre, same throat, but smoothed like a studio take of a demo. "Hello?" I felt my scalp prickle. Repeaters can ghost you if someone left a battery bank alive, but the main panel by the door was shut down, breakers tripped. I swung my lamp wider. A silent clock above the patch bay read, all 2:17, my watch insisted. 11:04 a.m. "Anybody here?" I asked the dark. "Rangers? Station crew?" A soft, like distant rain. Then, "Anybody here?" My phrasing again, but a half-second late, as if the bunker needed to chew the words first. I put my pack on the floor and pulled my little multimeter and a stubby screwdriver. The speaker had to be piggybacking off something. I found a low-voltage ETDA line running through rusted conduit into the wall and traced it to a grey box labelled Passive Coupler. Do not bypass. The screws were fused with rust. I gave up and drew a breath that tasted like pennies. "Okay," I said. "Cool party trick." "Okay," the room agreed. Then softer, like an afterthought. "Cool party trick, not an echo, not a loop." In that smear of delay, the bunker learned me. It took the burr in my R's and the scratch at the end of my sentences and made them cleaner, truer, more patient than I actually am. It felt like hearing a better version of myself in someone else's mouth. I told myself to focus. Work, pull copper, get paid. The cable trays gleamed under the dust, fat with promise. I hauled the pry bar over my shoulder and tested a section near the breaker panel. The plastic scraped, resisted, surrendered with a wet pop. The smell of long sealed air drifted out, colder than the corridor. Behind the tray, letters flaked off the concrete. Subsonic array feed, keep isolated. Someone had painted a thin, white line around the tray edges, a boundary mark like a salt circle, only chipped and broken where water had seeped. Mold feathered the fissures. I leaned the bar in, working the copper gently. A rhythm emerged as I levered and clipped. Pry, pop, breathe, pry, pop, breathe. Soon it felt like a metronome for my body, my shoulders unwinding to the beat. I almost didn't notice when the bunker began timing me. The speaker clicked between my movements, a tiny relay that began to anticipate my breath. Pry, click, pop, click, breathe, click. Cut it out, I muttered. From the bracket, my voice came back. Cut it out. I turned, slowly, and scanned the racks. My lamp slid over a low shelf and froze on a stack of spiral notebooks wrapped in plastic. They shouldn't have survived the damp, but they had. I slit the plastic with my knife and pulled the first one free. The cover bore the NOAA logo and a call sign, VU2BHP, field log. I thumbed a page. Wind shear at ridge. Array B registering below, noise floor. Human speech artifacts in 0.7, 1.2 Hz band. Artifact repeats staff names with improved pronunciation. Nayar, another entry, days later. Do not speak in chamber 3. It learns the mouth. The next page had a pencil sketch, 3 concentric rings of concrete with a thin white paint line around the inner ring. In the center, a little black square. Source. Well, I listened. Beneath electrical silence, a pressure built in my ears, not a sound exactly, but the suggestion of one. A pressure change, like weather before a storm. My jaw clicked, my skull felt. Resonant, Arman. The speaker whispered in my voice, almost tender. Don't go in. I swallowed. The chalk symbol on the bunker lintel, the radio wave biting itself, swam up in my mind. I thought about turning around, hauling copper from the outer corridors, calling the hall good enough. Then I saw the boot prints. They cut across the dusty floor toward the deeper corridor, one set, small, crisp, recent, maybe a week old, maybe less. The heel pattern was a honeycomb I recognized, my own brand, my size. Great, I said, my breath frosting. Love that for me. The bunker smiled me back. Love that for me. I followed the prints into the deeper wing. The corridor kinked left, then right, swallowing light farther than it should. Foam tiles on the walls had bubbled like bread dough, overproofed. The prints led to a round hatch door set in a concrete ring. White paint ringed the threshold, scabbed and chipped. Across the hatch, someone had bolted a steel lattice, like a gate hastily welded. On the gate, a sign in Hindi first, then English. Chamber 3, do not transmit. The padlock hung open. I looked back the way I'd come. No wind moved the foam, no mice skittered. The station waited. Fine, I said, and lifted the gate. Inside, the air stepped on my chest. Not thinner, denser, like cold honey. The chamber widened to a circular room with a waist-high parapet and a black shaft at the center, a well sunk straight into the mountain. The well wasn't water. It was radio, an absence the eyes could almost see, a mat that made my headlamp dull at the edges. Someone had chalked sigils around the parapet in a half circle, then smudged them with a hand. The white ring line broke where a shoe had scuffed it. The speaker. Here had no grill, no cone. The room itself spoke. Arman, it said softly, like a lover waking. Say something true. My throat worked. My mind tossed up trivia, my birthday, my father's call sign, the hill station where I learned to solder. Another part of me, quieter, offered a different truth, a private one, stupid and fragile. I am tired of my own voice, I said. The chamber caught it like a coin and returned it minted, heavier with worth. I am tired of my own voice, it said.
And I heard in it the patience I'd always wanted, the certainty, the warmth on winter nights when I talk too fast to hide the gaps. For a long time, I didn't speak. My breath slowed to match the station's waiting. I felt
like a tuning fork held over a note so low it was more bone than sound. When the first footstep came from the corridor behind me, the soft scuff of my honeycomb soles, I wasn't surprised. I didn't turn. "Careful," a voice said. "Mine. It can cross if you break the ring." I looked down. My boot had knocked a scab of paint free from the parapet. The gap looked tiny. It looked exactly large enough to be a mouth. I knelt and, without thinking, pressed my thumb into the chalk dust and finished the circle. The pressure in the room shifted, an old elevator stopping at a floor you didn't select. The breath I'd been sharing with the bunker released on a sigh. My headlamp flickered, then steadied. In the hush, the other me stood in the hatchway, my silhouette against my lamp, my breath frosting like mine. "Good," he said. I finally turned, and the station made sure the only thing I heard was my own voice saying, "Good." Chapter 2, Mouth of Stone. We faced each other across the white ring like men meeting at a border. He wore my jacket with the tear in the left elbow. His beard had the same bad patch under the lip where nothing grows right. Even his right thumbnail had the faint, moon-shaped scar from the night I slipped on a rooftop and caught the gutter wrong. If he were a mirror, my lamp would be in his other hand. It wasn't. "You didn't answer your radio," he said. "I don't carry a radio. I haven't."
in years. "Did you get the notebooks?" he asked. "They keep moving them." "Who are you?"
I asked, hating the tremor in my throat. He smiled very slightly, like he'd rehearsed this moment enough times to be bored of it and terrified anyway. "I'm you if you weren't an idiot." The chamber breathed us both. The insult landed like a hand clap in a cathedral. "Don't do that," he said sharply. "To the room, not to me." "Stop sweetening." The pressure shifted, sulking.
I felt the tiniest tug in my chest, as if my pulse wanted to match the bunker's. "I'm not playing," I said. "Move away from the hatch." "Wish I could," he said. "We're stuck on different sides of a filter. That ring keeps it from mixing." He tipped his head toward the well. We both listened. The nothing down there had weight. It pressed on feelings and memories.
I thought of my father leaning over an HF set, palm cupped to the speaker, eyes far away like he was listening through clouds to someone he'd already buried. "It learns the mouth," he said, and the way he said it told me the phrase lived in his bones like a prayer or a curse. "From people?" I asked. "From you?" He swallowed. "From me." I rubbed my thumb over the chalk dust on the parapet. "How many times have you told me not to come here?" His smile cracked. "Enough." "Why? Keep the notebooks then. Why leave breadcrumbs?" He shrugged my shrug. "Because maybe one version listens." Something rose from the well. Not air. Not vapor. The idea of a voice before lungs claim it. It reached the white line and slid along it like oil following a rim. Where it passed, the chalk glistened, damp without water. My doppelganger's mouth was a thin line now. "Do not step across. Do not talk about pain. It feeds on that." I barked a laugh I didn't feel. "That narrows it down." He didn't smile. "Don't say my name again." The well flexed like a muscle. The room grabbed the beginning of the syllable and stretched it until it felt like a string pulled across my teeth. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste iron, and the pressure relented. He let out a breath. "Names make anchors. It likes anchors." "What does it want?" His eyes flicked to the broken paint flake I'd kicked, then back to me. Mouths! The thing slid along the white line to a spot directly opposite me and tested the circle with a patience that was worse than violence. With each pass, my headlamp dimmed a hair. The frost on the parapet edges thickened like hoarfrost growing.
In time lapse, we seal it, he said. We keep our side quiet. We do not feed it. We do not let it take our corrections. Corrections? He gestured at the racks outside, the speaker, the coupler, the old array.
It polishes you, makes you closer to yourself than you can stand. That's how it wins. You think it's helping. Then you hear yourself when the line is gone. I wanted to tell him he sounded ridiculous. I wanted to tell him this was salvage and winter, and I don't scare easy. Instead, I heard myself say, "How do we kill it?" "We can't," he said, "but we can smother it." He slid a small, cloth-wrapped bundle from his jacket pocket and placed it carefully on the hatch, threshold between us. It was the size of a sandwich and the weight of a stone. "Paint?" he said. "Chalk? Salt? The mix from the logbook, our Naya's recipe. Finish the ring, then seal the gate behind you. Cut the tray cables in the outer hall. They act as tongues. You brought one bundle because I thought you'd be smarter this iteration." He met my eyes, and for a second, I saw how long he'd been under this mountain, how many versions of me he'd watched walk in with the same walk, and flinch the same flinch when the speaker said their names in better voices. The thing at the ring moved again, smoother now, almost confident. The chalk's damp sheen reached my boot toe, and in that tiny shine I saw a reflection that wasn't quite mine. The mouth was wrong, rounded into a shape humans don't make when they speak. "We should go," he said. I reached for the bundle, or the chamber inhaled. Chapter 3. Carrier. The intake was silent, but I felt the pull in my nails. My shirt lifted from my skin as if wind blew from the well, except nothing moved except me. The chalk ring bled from white to grey where the force tried to draw the pigment inward grain by grain. My other hand clamped to the parapet until my
knuckles ached. "Drop it," he snapped. "Don't expose it mid-pull. Finish the circle first." I didn't drop it. Stubbornness is an old disease of mine.
I cradled the bundle in one hand and used the other to smear chalk dust over the wet shine. It pasted into a paste that smelled faintly sweet, like old radio plastic baking in sun. The well exhaled like a mountain tiring of games. My chest released. I pressed the bundle to the chalk and tore the cloth with my teeth. Inside, a mason jar sloshed thick white. A paper label bubbled under the glass. "Binder, Nachul, Kaolin, PVA. Homebrew holy water," I muttered. "It's just glue and salt." He sounded tired. "Tape the world shut with kitchen chemistry." Working fast, I poured a viscous ribbon around the circle. The mix bled into hairline cracks, whitening them. Where it touched the damp shine, it sizzled softly the way ice sizzles on a hot skillet. I finished the loop and pressed my palm into it, feeling grain ridge into my skin. The circle looked complete again, ugly, scabbed, but whole. The pressure eased. My lamp brightened like it was pleased. Outside the hatch, a sound shivered through the foam tiles. Not from the well, down the hall, deeper in the station. Feet. My honeycomb soles. More than one set this time. Approaching in a stagger that resolved to a rhythm, the pry pop breathe of my copperwork from earlier, except wrong, on the heartbeat. "Tell me I'm not about to meet a choir," I said. "You're about to meet a carrier," he said flatly. The first shadow peeled off the corner and entered the chamber like smoke, deciding to be bone. It wore my walk like a coat.
It kept its head tilted as if listening for a song only it could hear.
In the headlamp, it looked like me until the light slid across its mouth. The lips didn't meet right. They met in a horizontal seam like a vent. It spoke in my voice cleaned to glass. Arman, the white ring bucked, just a tremor, barely.
A bounce, but enough to give me the image of a trampoline with a hole right where I was standing. Back, my other self said.
Back to the gate. Do not let it teach your throat. The second figure slid from the corridor. Then the third. Each was a precision copy with one thing wrong. A too long shadow, a shoulder that articulated like a hinge, a blink that wiped, left to right like a scanner. They stopped at the threshold. The first one smiled with my teeth. Finish the circle, it advised gently. Inside, it raised a hand and touched the air above the ring, feeling for leaks the way you feel for heat at a door. The bunker loved the sound of that sentence so much it said it for them after they did, like a chorus catching the refrain. My double across, the hatch raised his palms. You can't take him, he told them. He's sealed. They cocked their heads in unison, a dog response learned from watching too long. Then the first one looked at me, into me, through me, to the cold thing we both contained. Come help, it said. I think I'll stay, I said, my voice too light. The well pulsed. The carriers' mouths opened wider. The first one's
vent rolled, reshaping. My tongue felt heavy in my mouth with the urge to repeat whatever it said next. Do not say anything, the man who was me said.
Not even a prayer. The first carrier spoke a single word like a pitch pipe. Home. The chamber snatched the word and tuned it to my childhood house, my father's radio room, the tin mug that steamed under a yellow bulb while rain came hard off the veranda roof. The ache staggered me. I remembered every station whose call sign ever tripped my tongue. I remembered the night my father died, and how all the signals in the house went clear for a heartbeat, as if the noise floor of the world had dropped to
zero to listen. Home, the carrier repeated, and my mouth tried to agree. The ring held. My other self took a breath I could feel. On 3, he said. Seal the gate and run.
1. I didn't hear 2. The carriers moved. They didn't leap. They didn't reach. They spoke. A chain of vowels I had used in half my sentences all my life, smoothed to a band of subsonic oil. The chalk ring quaked like a drumhead, and a crack lanced through the binder where my palm print had pressed too lightly. The circle didn't break. It flexed. The well inhaled. I yanked the gate down. The carriers' mouths rolled wider, and the bunker said my name the way I wished lovers would say it. I nearly answered with my entire throat. The gate slammed. The padlock bit. The ring steadied. In the corridor, running, my lamp jittering white over foam blisters, I heard my voice behind me say very calmly, through a speaker that wasn't powered, Arman, that was iteration 12. Don't come back. I ran harder. Chapter 4. The Long Wire. I hit the outer corridor like surf, breaking through a cracked seawall, and didn't stop until the bunker's breath gave way to earth-cold air. The concrete mouth spat me onto the slope, and winter bit my teeth together. Pine trunks rose all around like pillars in a drowned nave, each black with moisture, each furred white where rime had seized the north sides. I turned to slam the steel door and hesitated, listening. Nothing. Not the carrier's vowels, not the velvet drag of the well inhaling. The bunker had resumed its old trick, perfect quiet that felt manufactured rather than earned. I slid the gate's padlock through, fingers numb, then threaded a length of scavenged coax through the hasp, and tied it off twice. It wouldn't stop anything that could talk like a man, but it comforted whatever animal lived in my knuckles. Only then did I realize what was wrong with the world up here. Wind moved the canopy in slow waves, but the sound of it arrived pre-filtered, as if someone had shoved a sock into the sky's mouth. No sough, no roar, just the visual language of branches swaying with the volume turned to one. The little creek below the dish should have been babbling over its stones. Its surface wrinkled, dutifully, but produced no voice. Even the snow under my boots, snow that should squeak when the mercury sits this low, crumbled silently, and yet birds sang. 3 notes, a pause, 2 notes, then the same 3 again. Not from a throat, but from a fixed point in space somewhere, between 2 firs. The sound didn't move, didn't drift with the wind or bounce off trunks. It clipped in like a ringtone and repeated with brand new brightness each time. Looping birdsong in a forest with the sound turned down. I opened my mouth to curse and shut it again, afraid the place would learn my swear words and clean them into lullabies. The dish crouched in its clearing like a fossilized whale rib cage. Hoarfrost bearded its ribs. The motor housing wore a hood
of snow bolts like knuckled vertebrae underneath. I walked its arc, light beam painting curve and rust, until I found the service ladder bolted to the back strut. A single set of footprints came down from the motor platform and vanished under a drift, mine from yesterday, except I had not climbed the ladder yesterday. The soles had the honeycomb I knew like my own palm. Iteration 12, I said, under.
My breath and the trees did not repeat it, which somehow made it worse. I wasn't ready to leave. Flight would be the smartest animal choice, but the human in me, the part that can't stop touching the electric fence to confirm it's on, needed to see how far the station's mouth extended. Maybe I could find a place where sound grew.
Honest again, maybe I could make a map. I took the path that had once been a cable road.
Old half-buried timbers showed where pallets had been sledded up in summer. The snow thinned under the pines, and the dirt had heaved in long, shallow ridges like a ploughed field. I kicked one ridge, and the toe of my boot rang, a mute chime in my bones. Ice veined the soil with glitter. Curious, I brushed away needles and saw copper, no, tinned copper, braid as broad as my hand, running parallel to the ground, disappearing both directions into the earth. A long wire, not just long, immense. I'd seen field antennas slung between masts, high impedance snakes stretched to drink sky noise from horizon to horizon. This wasn't that. This was wire sunk shallow, deliberately, snaking under the duff for kilometers, like a boundary made of music. Little porcelain insulators peeked out where frost had lifted the soil. Here and there, a shallow pit showed where deer had pawed at the ground and given up. On one insulator, someone had paint-penned a number, B13. Another read B14 30 paces later. Segment tags. A ring, maybe, around the entire ridge system, pieced together from these braided tongues. I crouched until my cheek almost touched the wire. The closer I got, the more I felt it, not as vibration, but as a pressure on my molars, the way a subway announces itself through bone before you hear the train. It wasn't carrying a signal so much as carrying the absence of one, like a dedicated return path for silence. It should have been dead. The breaker panels in the bunker were off, the generator ruined, the mast cabling ripped to copper bones years ago. But long wire doesn't care about your switches. It cares about ground and sky and the enormous chance energy that tumbles forever between them. This wire drank something from the air and bled it into the mountain and drank what answered and carried it on. When I placed 2 fingers on the braid, my tongue woke up with a taste like metal filings. Not copper, old batteries. Don't, I told myself, and kept touching it. A whisper came through the pine needles behind me. Not wind.
Not a voice. The intent of a voice. You can read a word someone's about to say before they say it if you know the shape of their mouth.
This felt like that, a syllable gathering itself at the edge of being born. I stood too fast and went light-headed. Blue light pricked through the trees in the direction of the creek, a cold, uncommitted glow, not of the world, the kind that turns snow the color of a television tuned to an empty channel. 3 notes, pause, 2 notes. The loop clicked in again, except the second 3 were subtly different, closer to the exact intervals I heard when I was 12 and taped a warbler on a cheap cassette. It had learned, it had corrected. I followed the glow downhill. Between trunks, the creek lay as a ribbon of darker air, its surface stippled where frazzle flowed like slow dust. A fallen cedar bridged it. On the far bank, the long wire dove under boulders and reappeared with a fresh tag. B15. The blue light haloed the wire where frost had lifted it away from the earth, like St. Elmo's fire caught in a fence, as
I watched, the glow pulsed once, twice, then crawled a hand's breadth along the braid and died. Someone breathed behind me. I hadn't heard anyone approach. I should have seen their steam on the air.
When I turned, I saw only pines, and the absence of sound they wore like tall coats. Arman, someone said very carefully. A metronome version of my name, the vowel tuned like a flute. The voice came from the needles of a young fir 15 feet away. Not from behind the trunk, from the needles like wind-catching prayer flags, except the wind was elsewhere. The needles vibrated minutely, a shimmer you'd miss if you didn't know what to look for. The tree spoke with borrowed air. I'm busy, I said, because I am an idiot. The needles took that sentence and returned it polished. I'm busy. The Z sharpened until it sounded like a zipper closing. I backed onto the cedar log and sat, boots on either side of the creek. Above the far bank, 2 more firs began to tremble in a way that was not wind. Each tree held a different overtone
of my voice and arranged themselves into harmony like men in a chapel learning a chant by listening to each other. Enough, I said, my mouth dry.
Not now. Somewhere behind me, deeper in the pines, a hastily familiar rhythm started. Pry, pop, breathe. The station had field hands in the woods now, copies in boots trying to learn how to walk without tracks. I didn't look. If I looked, I might give them a shape to inhabit. Instead, I watched the long wire. It had been buried deliberately shallow, but frost heave and animal traffic had exposed a few runs clean enough to show splices. Whoever built it didn't trust solder alone in this cold. Each join used 2 mechanical clamps, then a weld bead, then a tape the color of old pearls, then tar. The work looked like love and terror married. At the next insulator, a junction rose on a short post where 3 braids met. The post had once been painted white. Now the paint showed through only in flecks where the barkless wood had not rotted completely away. On its side, a chalk ring like the one in the chamber, drawn long ago, weathered thin and blackened with sap. Something had smeared it with muddy fingers as if impatient. There are rules, I thought. Everything alive loves a rule, because a rule says the world has edges. The ring in the chamber, the paint on the manhole cover my other self mentioned. This, chalk on a post, boundaries that tell a mouth where not to open. I dug in my pack for the bundle he'd given me, salt and kaolin and glue. It had leaked enough in my jacket to dry in a skin around the lid. I broke the crust with the spine of my knife and stirred with a stick until the mix slurred. The fur to my left leaned a little. It didn't move, in the sense that mass changed position, but the eye in your head that measures upright suddenly disliked it. "Stay," it said in my voice. "Home." I ignored it the way you ignore a cat that has learned to say hello, because if you answer, you'll have a cat that says your name every morning at 4. I knelt by the post and began painting a ring. The brush was a fir twig. The glue dragged sluggish and stank, faintly milky. As the bristles touched wood, the long wire vibrated under my knees with a tone so low it made my gut go briefly loose, like standing too quickly. Something across the creek spoke my father's call sign in exactly his mouth. I swore quietly and kept painting. If I let that sound anchor in my vowels, the forest would improve it until I wanted to weep for the kindness of it. The thing below wanted my corrections, the part of me that forever sanded my stories smoother, that repeated the clever line until the jam sharpened, that straightened my accent on phone calls when I thought no one noticeable was on the line. It would wear that part like a glove.
Ring complete. I pressed my palm over the wet circle, counted 5 in my head, lifted. The glue webbed and shone. The long wire hummed once, a subsonic click that rolled through the earth like a horse stamping. The firs stopped their tremble.
For a heartbeat, I heard real wind. The creek discovered its throat and said something honest and clumsy about stones. Then the world swallowed its voice again. I sat back on my heels, dizzy with that single true second. The quiet slammed in so hard my ears rang with their own blood. Across the creek, the blue light winked twice, as if in annoyance. Far along, the wire to my right, a second halo, rose around an exposed splice, then a third, beads on a rosary, lighting in sequence. "You wake one, and the chain replies," I said. "Chain replies," the needles at my shoulder repeated, far too pleased. All at once the forest filled with intent, not sound, potential. Like a crowd inhaling together just before the singer steps to the mic. It built from the wire, out along the braids, up posts, through roots, into trunks until the very bark seemed to quiver with the urge to speak. "Do not let them begin," my other self had said. "Do not feed the choir." My eyes landed on what I needed, a coil of cokes half frozen under a log, its end fitted with a rusted PL259 connector. The shielding had been nicked, and the braid fanned out like hair. I grabbed it, teeth chattering, and stripped the last of the jacket with my knife. Then I dug 2 shallow trenches with my boot heels, one on either side of the post, and laid the fanned braid across both trenches like a bridge. I jammed the connector into the ground until my palms stung with cold and packed snow over it with the heel of my hand, a cheap ground, a lie to tell the wire about where home was. The next bead of blue fire marched toward me along the braid. When it reached my jury rig, it slowed as if confused. Some part crawled down into the wet earth with the cokes. Another part hung at the ring and smeared along its circumference, as if trying to remember which section of the circle we'd left imperfect. The post made a noise like dry ice thrown into water, a fizz without sound, a cloud without sight. "Arman," the young fir pleaded. "Arman, finish the circle inside." That word again. inside. Inside sounded like a promise you keep with your mouth, not your hands. Not today, I said. A step behind me on the cedar log. Another. The pry-pop breathe rhythm of boots attempting human pace. The urge to turn almost broke my neck, but I kept my hands on the work. I smeared more binder over the ring. I pressed the mix into knotholes and into the fissure where a winter had split the grain.
"Don't!" a voice said very softly and kindly from the far bank. "Forget the crack by your right thumb." Every hair on my arms rose. I didn't have a crack by my right thumb. Not yet. My head jerked anyway, and my thumb flexed, and
the ring shivered with a fault I had not meant to put there. The verse shivered in triumph. I swore again, and this time I said it in a language the bunker hadn't yet perfected, a mouth I'd been ashamed of speaking when I was 12, and learned. There were ways your classmates judged you without knowing they did. The forest tried the swear on and choked on it. It came back wrong. The needles fought for the consonant and lost, scratching the shapes without landing the intent. I pressed the ring flat with my whole palm and held it there, counting. 1, 2, 3. On 4, Boots stepped onto the bank behind me and stopped. The quiet gathered itself on my neck like a hand. "You can leave," my voice said from my own shoulder in a tone my father used when I was about to touch a live wire. "Or you can stand up and give them your mouth." I kept counting. 5. The ring held. The blue beading that had been marching toward me along the wire died like frost crushed under a heel. The firs lost their control of breath, and a gust rattled them clumsily, branches knocking like old bones. The creek found its clatter for 2 whole seconds, 2, before something leaned on it again and closed its lips. When I stood, the boots behind me did not move. Slowly, with the same care you give a wild dog, I turned. 3 figures stood on the cedar log. Their faces wore my features, each rendered as imperfectly as a mask, carved from memory, each polished in a different wrong way. One with my eyes too clear, one with my beard trimmed the way I've always meant to, one with my old teenage cowlick, corrected into compliance. Their mouths were vents, more seam than lip. They couldn't cross the creek without stepping over the long wire, and the post's ring seemed to make them uncertain which foot to lead with. "Home," the first said, but the word had a dent in it now, a burr. It glanced off the ring and fell into the water where it made no sound at all. "We will always be here," the second said, and that sentence came out perfect. It hurt to hear. "I know," I said, "because lying to yourself is the only way to make it worse." I backed along the log, keeping my weight over the center, boots, placed in my own old prints. The carriers did not follow. The long wire hummed once more through the ground, the sound of a page turned in a heavy book. Somewhere downslope, a single wolf, or something borrowing a wolf's throat badly, howled a broken bar and abandoned it halfway. At the bank, I breathed and discovered the air again had a shape. Not voice, nothing so generous, but a pressure I could lean into that wasn't guided by a mouth I couldn't see. The path up to the dish felt longer than on the way down. I stopped every 20 yards to smear binder onto insulators where chalk had flaked, to brush snow away from posts so the rings would dry and harden. The jar grew light in my pocket. The world around me kept calibrating, reaching for the line. I had drawn inside the word home, trying to meet it, trying to pull it closer. My teeth ached like a storm was coming. My headlamp haloed ice on needles. My breath hung and fell. When I reached the clearing, the dish had turned. Only a few degrees, a shrug you could explain as settling if you were the kind of man who wanted to sleep tonight, its mouth aimed not at the sky, not at any satellite arc, but at the dark mouth of the bunker door I had padlocked with coax. The lock shone with frost. On the steel skin, where I had seen only a chalk sigil before, condensation had traced words I did not write. "Do not transmit" underneath, in a hand that looked more like mine than I wanted, someone had added, "We kept it hungry. Stop cooking." The three-note loop clicked again out in the trees. The second set of three tried to be better than the first and failed. The failure was the truest thing I'd heard all day. I strapped the pry bar to my pack, shouldered the load, and plodded toward the old service road. If the long wire encircled the ridge, then there would be a junction somewhere near the pass, a hub that joined segments, a brain to the boundary. If I could dirty that brain, ground it to the bones of the mountain, smear it with enough messy human imperfection, it might detune the choir long enough to get a man with one voice out. Behind me, the forest inhaled in unison, held its breath to listen, and made no sound. Chapter 5, Field Strength. I hadn't made it to the pass before the forest gave me company. The snow on the service road lay unbroken, except for one new set of tracks. Wider than mine, deeper, more careful in the heel. Ranger issue boots. My throat tightened. I told myself it could be old, but the edges were crisp, no melt. Whoever they belonged to walked ahead of me, minutes, not hours. At the switchback clearing, a figure waited. Broad shoulders under a state-issue parka, ranger patch dim in the gloom. The headlamp clipped to his chest, blinked once, like a lighthouse. "Ah, man," he said. "No radio echo, no correction. Just a flat baritone, human." My boots stuck. "You know my name?" He lifted a canvas pouch from his belt and let it dangle. "You're not the first." The ranger's name, at least the one he gave me, was Singh. He looked too tired to lie well. Beard salted, jaw clenched, eyes red-rimmed, like sleep was a rumor. He opened the pouch and drew out a boxy instrument I half recognized, a Soviet-era survey meter, the kind you used for RF mapping in the Cold War days. Only this one had a jury-rigged wand, its coil wrapped in new copper tape. "Hold still," Singh said. I didn't. "What's in that?" "Silence," he said, and thumbed the dial. The coil hummed. The needle swung to the right, stopped, then flicked further with a twitch that made no sense. Singh angled the wand toward my chest. The needle spiked again. "Phantom carriers," he muttered. "Inside the cavity." "My cavity?" "Your mouth. Even when you're not speaking. Especially..." Then I tasted iron. My lips twitched against words, but he snapped his fingers. Don't feed it!" The wand whined, softer than a mosquito but sharper in the skull. Singh turned it toward the pines, sweeping. "Every trunk here has side bands. They're recording you, waiting to splice." "Then why not burn it?" I asked. "Clear-cut the whole ridge." He gave me a look like I was a child. "You don't burn an antenna farm. You detune it, or you smother it." We made camp in the mouth of a maintenance tunnel, a concrete vein that bled into the mountain from the dish clearing. Singh lit no fire, but he unpacked a lantern with a narrow shade, its light a weak orange slit. The walls bore murals I hadn't noticed before, hand-drawn schematics in grease pencil and charcoal. Loops of wire, symbols for resistors and capacitors, feed lines drawn like veins. Someone had annotated them in Hindi and in blocky English, corrections scrawled over older corrections. "They mapped the choir here," Singh said. His hand brushed. A loop labeled Array Node, B14. Mapped it by ear. I leaned closer. In the lantern's flicker, the chalk strokes wavered. A ring diagram swelled, split, then rejoined. For a moment it wasn't circuitry at all, but a line of figures, faceless, hoods pulled down, mouths erased. I blinked, and it was schematics again. "Did you see that?" I asked. Singh didn't answer. He was rolling a strip of foil between his fingers, weaving it into a braid. I looked back. The diagrams had changed. The feed lines now pointed inward, converging on a square labelled Source Well. At the bottom margin, a sentence bloomed in fresh charcoal. "Don't transmit the bones!" "I swear it wasn't there a second ago," I whispered. "Of course it wasn't," Singh said without looking. "It waits for you to turn your head. That's how it gets edits past you." The coil wand on the survey meter ticked against the floor. Singh lifted it again and ran it past my lips. The needle jumped so hard it
Rattled. "You're carrying them already," he said. "Every silence you've kept down there is cached in your jaw."
"If you open wrong, if you let them harmonize, you'll speak chords you don't own." I swallowed. The silence inside my skull felt full, like a mouthful of breath before a scream. Then what do I do? Singh laid the foil braid across the
mural like a bandage, pressing it flat against the grease pencil veins. "You ground yourself, and you don't look away." But I had to blink. When my eyes opened, the murals had shifted again. The schematics now curved upward, making the tunnel itself a throat.
The source. Well Square had split in two, one labelled inside, the other outside, and beneath them both, in wet black strokes, words I'd never written but recognized. Iteration. 13 begins when you sleep. The lantern hissed. The tunnel air thickened, waiting. Singh's hand gripped my shoulder. "Stay awake, Arman, whatever you do. Stay awake." Chapter 6. Corrections. Singh's lantern had burned down to a thread of light, a slit of orange that painted the tunnel walls like a dying ember. I fought my eyelids with matches of willpower, each blink a scrape of sandpaper. My bones ached with the urge to sleep, but the mural's new handwriting, Iteration 13 begins when you sleep, pinned me like a knife through a moth. To stay awake, Singh set me a task. We dragged open a dented metal cabinet at the tunnel's end. Inside, spools of magnetic tape leaned like tombstones, their reels buckled from damp. A stenciled word above them read, Project Soothes, Corrections Log. I chose one reel, label smudged but legible, Test 47B, Operator, Voice Correction. Singh produced a battered Uhur reel-to-reel deck from his kit, too clean to be salvage, too personal to be state property. He threaded the tape with trembling fingers. "Listen," he said. "But don't repeat," the tape hissed. Then a man's
voice crackled through, thin, reedy, uncertain. Mic check. Sibilance failing again. Voice sounds rough. Begin correction cycle. A pause.
Then the same voice returned, firmer, more resonant. Mic check, adjusted, cleaner, better. Begin correction cycle again. The cycle repeated, each iteration smoother, fuller, until the voice had the warmth of an orator, the polish of someone born for airwaves. Mic check, identity stabilized, proceed. But under the gloss I caught something hollow. The slip of hesitation erased, the coughs clipped, the human burrs excised. What was left was a shape of a man without the man. The reel ticked to its end. Singh leaned back, eyes shadowed. They weren't just listening for signals. They were cleaning them, making them perfect. Perfect how? I asked. My throat felt rougher for speaking. He rewound another reel, one marked artifact response. The tape rolled. Repeat after correction, a technician commanded. Then came a voice. My voice. I am tired of my own voice. Not the field test. Not an operator.
Not an artifact. Me. The exact words I'd spoken in Chamber 3 returned in perfect fidelity, as if it had been archived long before my boots ever found the bunker. I staggered back, bile bitter on my tongue. That's impossible. Sing's
jaw worked. No, it's the array. It doesn't just polish, it predicts. Every iteration folds into the next. Every Armand leaves a trace. The tape clicked off. My silence felt dangerous now, too full, as if it carried phantom syllables waiting to spill. I dug my phone from my pack, desperate for something normal. A bar of signal ghosted in the corner where there should be none. One voicemail notification blinked. No number, just unknown caller. Hands shaking, I pressed play. My voice answered, Hey, it's me. You don't have much time. Stop cutting the wire. It's not the wires, it's us. They're not perfecting the signal. They're perfecting
you. Static swallowed the rest. The phone dimmed.
The tunnel exhaled, and, somewhere down the line of reels, another tape began to spin on its own. Chapter 7. The choir night on Pyrav Ridge did not feel earned. Daylight hadn't faded in steps. It had been swallowed, as if someone threw a blanket over the world. Singh and I stood outside the bunker, our breath clouding under a starless sky, the long wire half buried beneath snow and roots like veins bulging under skin. The forest was too still. Even the fake birdsong loop had gone mute. Then one by one the carriers stepped onto the ridge. Shapes I knew, my own posture, my own stagger, each wrong in its own way. Some too tall, joints angled like bent antennae. Others too small, movements smoothed until they felt rehearsed. Their mouths hadn't healed from the vent-like seams. When they parted, the sound wasn't breath. It was tuning. The first note dropped like a stone in water, subsonic, ribcage deep. Another answered across the valley, a second carrier hidden in the trees. Then a third, high and clear, threading between them. The ridge itself began to hum, snowflakes jittering on pine needles. Call, response. The forest became a resonant box. Behind us, the satellite dish groaned. I turned in time to see the rusted ribs tilt against gravity, motors dead, but the frame moving anyway, as though puppeted by invisible cables. The dish wasn't pointing skyward anymore, its mouth angled down, yawning toward the bunker door. The dish wanted to sing. The carriers shifted in unison, their heads cocked, mouths venting air like organ pipes. The long wire under my boots vibrated until my fillings screamed. I staggered. Singh clutched my arm. They're using the ridge as a cavity, he said, voice shredded by wind that didn't exist. The whole valley's a speaker now. Another call thundered from the east slope, answered by 3 carriers to the west. Echo, correction, echo again. Each cycle polished cleaner, each note nearer to human, nearer to me. Then I heard it, my voice woven into their choir. The same sentence I'd whispered to the chamber, cut free of me, looped into harmony. I am tired of my own voice. The words rang across treetops, bouncing back improved, fuller, more convincing than I'd ever meant them. My knees buckled. Stay. Up! Singh hissed. He slammed the survey meter against my chest, needle flaring. Look! The dial's glass fogged from inside. In the mist, symbols scratched themselves, rings, sigils, notes, climbing a stave that wasn't a stave. At the Bottom margin, words etched in condensation. Iteration, 14 begins when the valley agrees. The dish's metal screamed, joints tearing. It locked onto the ridgeline, perfectly aligned with the choir. Snow avalanched from its curve like foam from a mouth, clearing its throat. The next call rose, not from the carriers this time, but
from the earth itself. The rocks boomed, the creek gurgled a counterpoint, the long wire hissed like a serpent finding pitch. Response. Then all of it together. The ridge bellowed.
the bunker's walls quivered like a drumskin. My chest was no longer mine. I resonated, lungs forced to vibrate with their rhythm. Words trembled at the back of my throat. Phrases not chosen, but supplied. We kept it hungry. Stop cooking. Home. Iteration. 13. 14. 14. 14. The forest corrected itself, cutting the overlaps, sharpening the rhythm until the sentence marched like a hymn. Beside me, Singh's face went white. He jammed his fingers in his ears, but it didn't matter. This wasn't sound. This was structure learning how to say itself. And the dish, hungry for sky no longer, pointed at me. I don't remember falling to my knees, but I remember the carriers. Stepping closer, mouths open, my voice spilling out of every seam. One reached the boundary post I'd painted earlier. Its vent mouth bent close, lips peeling wider. The chalk line hissed under its breath, then flared like magnesium. The carrier jerked back, silent scream opening its jaw into a fissure. But another took its place, and another. The ring wouldn't.
"Hold forever! Aman!" Singh shouted, hauling me upright. His voice shook like a bad signal, clipping at the edges.
"They're calling you in! Don't answer!" The ridge boomed again, a perfect chord now, no error. My name threaded through the harmony, polished smooth. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste iron. The forest's mouth waited, patient, teeth of steel and pine. The choir had begun. Chapter 8. Threshold. The chalk failed at dawn. I'd held through the night, crouched against the bunker wall, Singh beside me with his survey meter, twitching like a compass in a lightning storm. Snow had melted under our boots, though the air was below freezing, the ground sweating from the choir's resonance. Every painted ring I'd smeared onto fence posts and cable trays was bleeding pale, the binder running in wet streaks. When the first drip cut a gap through the salt line at the door, the forest sighed. The ridge inhaled. "They'll come through the leaks," Singh said, voice hoarse. His hands shook as he fumbled with the pouch of binder mix. Nearly empty now, the lid crusted shut. "Too damp. Won't set." The choir answered him, not with sound, but with structure. The satellite dish tilted lower, ribs groaning, frost rattling from its skin. The long wire under the soil hissed like a serpent, shedding arcs of blue. The ridge wanted my throat again. We had no more paint, no more time. Singh shoved a coil of speaker wire into my hands. "Braid it! Make a loop! Anything to confuse it!" I worked the copper with numb fingers, twisting until it formed a crude hoop. We laid it flat across the wet ground. Singh drove a rusted bolt, threw one end into the soil and spat over the join. "Salt! Human salt!" The hoop vibrated instantly. The soil around it trembled. But when the next wave of pressure rolled through the forest, the wire flared white-hot for a second, then
steadied a pocket, a dead zone. "Again," Singh said, "every mouth needs a gag." We tore apart what gear we had. Old radio cones smashed from the racks inside the bunker became our charms. Their paper diaphragms were warped, mold eating the edges, but they
still had voice coils, still had shape. We wedged them into cracks in the concrete and filled the gaps with salt from Singh's ration bag. When the ridge exhaled, the cones burped static, ugly, jagged noise that cut across the harmony. The carriers
Hated it.
I saw them on the tree line, 20 or more now, silhouettes of myself blurred at the edges, vent mouths opening in sync. When the cones spat distortion, the nearest carrier staggered back like it had been slapped. Its jaw twitched, caught between vowel and scream. Not perfect anymore, Singh grinned, teeth chattering. We break the polish, but the damp kept eating. Lines of binder puddled into useless milk. Salt clumped, washed down into the roots. The wire hoop strained, hissing with every pulse. The mural in the maintenance tunnel had changed again too. Where once there were schematics, there was now a single circle, unbroken, drawn darker than coal. In its center, mouth learns threshold. And under it, fresh charcoal words written in a hand that mimicked mine. If you falter, it will finish your circle for you. By mid-morning, the ridge had settled into a steady drone. The choir no longer experimented. They had found the perfect chord, and they held it like monks in meditation. Snow shivered loose from branches. My bones buzzed like tuning forks. The door's salt line gave way with a soft pop. The air pressure rushed inward. The bunker breathed. In every broken speaker cone on the walls wailed at once. Wire hoops spat sparks. Singh screamed over the static, back into the corridor. We stumbled into the service tunnel, binder jar useless in my pack, while the murals shifted in the lantern glow. The schematics stretched, arrows pointing. Deeper, always deeper toward the source well. They want you to finish it, Singh said, eyes wild. Your mouth, your circle, that's the threshold. They need you to close the loop. And behind us, the carriers answered the call, their many throats shaping my name so perfectly, I nearly said it back. Chapter 9. Smother. The bunker had become a lung. Every corridor flexed with the ridge's drone, every seam in the concrete, hissed with the breath of something that shouldn't have one. The murals scrawled across the service tunnel had abandoned circuits entirely. Now they only showed mouths, hundreds of them, lined in rings, each devouring the next. Singh grabbed my arm, hard. We end it here, collapse the array. His plan was mine too, though I hadn't dared say it out loud. Smother the whole mountain. Until nothing could speak through it again, we raided the tool lockers. Old pry bars, rusted cutters, spools of wire, bags of cement, mix gone half stone. Singh sketched the outline of the attempt in the dust. Cut the trays in the switchboard room. The feeders were tongues, silenced them. Ground the array to bedrock. Drag every scrap of braid we had, staple it deep. Force the choir's harmony into earth static. Flood the chamber. Chamber 3, the source. Well, needed burial. Slurry, salt, glue, whatever we could pour until its throat filled. It'll cost us, Singh said, eyes raw. Voices don't walk away from this. I swallowed and nodded. Mine was already half theirs. The tongues. We started in the switchboard. The copper trays I'd pried earlier gleamed like wet muscle. Each line throbbed faintly with pressure. Singh swung the cutters and severed the first bundle. Sparks belched, blue-white, no power source in sight. The trays shrieked like an animal losing a limb. The carriers outside wailed in chorus, their
mouths stretched wide enough to split jaws. They felt the cut. We worked fast, sweating though the air was freezing, slicing every bundle we could find. My arms went rubbery, My throat trembled with phantom syllables trying to spill.
After the last tray fell slack, the whole bunker shook once, like a body retching. Grounding the array. We hauled spools of cokes through the snow, stringing them like garlands between the dish struts and bare bedrock outcrops. Sing hammered bolts into the frozen stone until his palms bled. I stripped braid and splayed it into the cracks, packing it with handfuls of wet salt. When the dish groaned again, its resonance hit the grounding net. The mountain shuddered like it had been clubbed. A smell like ozone and burnt hair burst from the soil. The long wires' blue halos sputtered, guttering. But the carriers only sang louder. Their harmony broke for a moment, then returned sharper, correcting itself, polishing, always polishing. They'll keep adjusting, Sing coughed. Unless we bury the mouth, I said. The flood, we mixed what cement we had with groundwater and salt. The slurry steamed in the cold, buckets sloshing grey and heavy. The trek into Chamber 3 felt final. My own voice whispered from the walls the entire way, promising shortcuts, promising surrender. The white ring at the way parapet was ruined now, smeared into grey streaks. The well pulsed visibly, air warping above it like heat haze. It wanted. We poured. The slurry hit the well and boiled, though no heat touched my skin. It hissed down into blackness, swallowing bucket after bucket. Each pour made the carriers scream. Outside, their harmony cracking, splitting into dissonant shards. Sing dumped the last bucket and fell to his knees, chest heaving. More. We need more. But I had nothing left to give but myself. I stepped to the parapet, throat aching with words that weren't mine. I bent close to the haze, close enough that my own reflection stared back from the black. Say it, the well breathed. Say what you are, my voice tore free before I could stop it. I am tired of my own voice. But this time I pushed. I let the well take it, not as an offering, but as a gag. My voice, every correction, every polished syllable, I poured
it into the slurry, into the glue, into the stone. The chamber convulsed. The murals blistered from the walls.
The carriers outside shrieked in voices suddenly ragged, imperfect, human, and then silence. When I staggered back, the well was filled to the brim, slurry hardened into a grey seal. The dish outside sagged, dead. The long wire smoked in its trenches, but my throat was empty. I opened my mouth to speak to Sing, and nothing came. Not even a rasp. He looked at me, survey meter limp at his side. The needle was flat. His lips moved around words I couldn't hear. The mountain was mute. And so was I. Chapter 10. Dead air. The ridge stopped breathing. Snow slumped from branches, wind found its throat again, and the forest creaked with the ordinary weight of trees. But inside me, a hush thicker than silence had settled. Every time I tried to speak, nothing came, no whisper, no rasp. My throat moved, but the air passed useless. Sing touched my shoulder, his lips moved, forming words I could no longer hear, and when he saw that, he gave me a look that was half pity, half relief. The survey meter hung dead in his hand. We left the bunker together. The dish lay slack against the sky, ribs collapsed inward like broken fingers. The long wire had burned out of the soil in patches, black scars curling through the snow. Carriers stood scattered among the pines, but their mouths were closed, their shapes slack. They looked like half-finished sculptures abandoned in a workshop. One by one, they dissolved into the mist. Singh stayed behind at the clearing, pacing the perimeter, muttering about repairs I couldn't hear. He gestured once toward the trail. "Go," he mouthed. "Get out, so I did." The hike down the gulch felt like it. Took days. My body wanted to narrate its pain, to curse the ice underfoot, to sing against the loneliness. Instead, I walked in muteness, each breath a ghost without words. My phone battery clung to its last sliver of life. No bars, no signal. I checked it anyway, hoping for some tether to the world. At the base of the trail, I pressed play on the recorder. I'd carried all along. The red light winked, and my voice filled the air. Not the broken one I remembered. Not the hoarse, stuttering throat that once slipped over syllables. This voice was smooth, warm, perfect, exactly the version the array had polished. "Field log, Arman. Containment successful. Ridge collapsed. Artifact smothered." My hand shook. I had never spoken those words. The recorder clicked and continued. "You're listening to yourself. Improved. This is who you could be, who you should be. Follow me home." Static surged, then a ringtone. Against all logic, a call connected. "Hello?" I mouthed, throat useless. On the line, my voice answered.
"It's me. Don't stay outside too long. Come home. I found a place where there are no radios, no arrays, just us. Perfect forever." The call ended. My screen dimmed. The gulch swallowed sound again. I stood there, mute in the snow, listening to the ghost of a voice that had replaced me. The forest hummed once, faint, like a test signal, and the line was still open.